Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new season of Tome Travelers, the original tabletop RPG pop culture retrospective show, which is a really long way of saying we like to talk about games and get people together. Tonight, we journey beyond the mundane and into the extraordinary to embark on a quest through the world of RPGs. Let's have everybody here introduce themselves, what you've been involved in, and what is one tabletop trope you've encountered in-game. Anthony, you know you're up first.
Yeah, I get it. You know, hit the big guy. So I'm Anthony Domenico, better known as Librarian NPC. I am the owner and operator of a small indie game publisher and 3D print company called Pithy Productions. I've been in tabletop games in some capacity or another as a fan in the late 90s, early 2000s, then moved into playtesting, editing, and then finally publishing over the last 15 years or so. My first game came out in 2021 called Ghast Bashers, which is my d12 powered comedy horror inspired exactly by what you think. And since you asked about what tropes we've encountered, I think the one trope that I think everyone here has encountered at some point is the edgelord edgegod.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They're always going to find a corner. They're always going to sit there. They're always going to be polishing their weapons or armor or something else and brood. And you could see their backstory from a mile away. But at the same time, I don't think any game is complete without one.
Oh, I feel better now. Come on, I've been in gaming long enough. I probably filled that role at some point.
I think we all have.
Yeah. Well,
it's like a badge of honor.
Yeah, definitely. Well, going down the line of who I've got in front of me on my screen, Mr. Michael Ross, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's me. My name is Michael. I'm online in a lot of places as the RPG Academy. That's the name of the podcast I've been a host of for about 12, 13 years. I've lost count. I do a little bit of streaming. I host a small gaming convention in Dayton, Ohio each year. And I last year published my first game through Kickstarter. It is a GM-less game about bad action movies using only the best polyhedral, the d12. The trope I will mention, because I actually had this happen not too long ago. I have two boys, 14 and 13, and they both started running games. And if you try to draw a map, just sort of like on the fly, invariably it will look like a sex organ. And that is exactly what happened. He's drawing a map, and I'm like, you know what that looks like? And it was just the whole table started cracking up, because it always happens.
I love it. Well, coming up and coming around, we're going to go ahead and go then with new guest at the table. So, Connor, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Connor Alexander. I'm the owner of Coyote and Crow Games. We started out by publishing our tabletop role-playing game called Coyote and Crow. We've since branched out into other tabletop games as well. I have a background in film and television originally, but started working in the game industry in 2014, and then started designing back in 2018. And we're about to go to Kickstarter on our latest expansion for Coyote and Crow. That launches next month. That's keeping me very busy.
Seeing the Facebook ads pop up for that.
Oh, good. That money's working. As far as tropes, I'm going to say I'm not sure if mine is a trope or a curse, but how many times have we all stepped on a D4? Ooh. And my God, I don't even want to think about how many times I've stepped on them. It still gives me chills thinking about stepping on a D4.
I get it.
Good old caltrops.
Well, I might say hello to Sharene.
Hello, I'm Sharene, also known as Mad Fishmonger. I've been gaming since the mid-90s. I've played all kinds of stuff, done LARPing, and I've run and played in online text-based servers. And in about 2015 or so, I started doing some writing. I've got to write for O-Run. I've gotten to write for a bunch of capers, and I got to develop the system for Stagged Heroism, and I co-wrote 2 solo RPGs with some just absolutely gorgeous psychedelic art. Like, just for the art alone, get those books, you know? And since about 2015 or so, I developed a neurological disorder, and so I've been trying to, kind of off and on doing a bunch of work, and I've written for a whole bunch of things.
Well, last but not least, we're going to be going over to Todd.
Oh my goodness, the last one, there's so much pressure at the moment. And the fact that now I'm thinking of penis. Yeah.
Oh, Sharene, I'm sorry. Do you want to
I totally forgot my trope. I just remembered it, and I had to interrupt you. I'm sorry. The trope I wanted to that reminded me of in everybody being the last surviving member of the village. There were so many last surviving members at one point that we had this running joke that there was this like sort of entire province that was nothing but smoking ruins of villages with like lone survivors wandering around. It was like this entire
Well, Todd, let's go ahead and get you in there.
No problem. I'm still trying to get penis-shaped hallways out of my head, actually. That's going to burn
Absolutely, my
for a
pleasure.
couple of days. My name is Todd Crapper, also known as the Warden, and if you have ever served time in Folsom County, I am not your Warden. That's a different Warden. I have actually been working in the RPG space in some capacity since about 2001. And I have been publishing my own games since 2012. In that time, I've won a couple of ENnie Awards. The trope that immediately came to mind is having a game derail with an argument as to why the Star Wars prequels ruined Star Wars. It has got to the point that actually refusing to discuss the Star Wars films is now a permanent part of my session 0. It is right up there with we will not talk about this subject matter, and the first person who brings up Jar Jar Binks permanently executed from the game. That is the trope that I think that I've dealt with. I think that everybody can identify with.
Going ahead and hopping in then. Hi, everyone. My name is John. I'm part of the leadership here at Rook and Rasp. I put out a game called Gutterpunk this about 2 years ago. But before that, I have been in podcasting and in Twitch streaming now for coming up on 10 years pretty soon. And I am very honored to have this group here for our panel tonight. So thank you all for joining us. Goodness, I guess I got to do my trope. I have been in a party where somebody truly stole the pants off of someone. If you've ever seen the beloved movie, The Gamers, there's this opening scene and the thief steals pants off a person at the tavern counter. And I have been in a situation where a player has done just that, which is why, honestly, I think those movies kind of resonate, is because many of us have had those experiences. Today, we're jumping from the popular D20 of last episode to tabletop's role-playing wallflower, the D12. Now, the D12, in my opinion, and obviously, if you really have been paying attention, has seen a resurgence in popularity with game creators these last few years. So I'm going to really quiz my associates here for this panel of my guests who has played a D12 system game recently besides the one you've created.
Hold on a sec. You can play other people's games other than the one that you made? God, no, I understand.
Yeah,
this is a thing?
You know, I understand that does happen quite a bit.
Huh.
Sad to say, I can't think of one.
I cannot either.
You know?
Not recently, anyways.
I mean, outside of what everyone's been saying, if it's not what they've written, I think the last time I played a D12 only game was in, I want to say, 2010. So not exactly very recent.
We still have work to do.
Yeah. I can't remember playing one anytime recently, but I want to, because I want to see how it skews differently. I want to see the mechanics of it, you know?
Just the ludology of it. Has anybody offered to run your game for you yet?
My kids have offered to run it for me. It hasn't happened yet, but they have.
That said, I mean, yeah, obviously coming around to this. This is part of what we do with Tome Travelers, is we discuss where certain things in gaming come from, why they are what they are, and give a little bit of an idea of where things come from. Because I think that gives a little bit of the flavor of why the game is the way it is when we talk about the era that it comes around in. This time I want us to hit some dice. Where did the D12 come from in this discussion? We know that, like the D20, the shape has existed since the Egyptians and then the Romans. But it is believed that the D12 has been used in various cultures. It's been used in fortune telling to represent the cycles of the moon. But in gaming, now this is a weird one. The D12 was first used or patented in games in 1900 Common Era by a person named V. Mapes, who I can actually find absolutely no information on. I don't know who they are, what they did, besides the fact that they patented a D12 as a part of a game. And the idea was it's 6 D12. Each face is a different card from our common card suites. And, all the faces add up to try, as you roll all the dice, get a hand for poker. But that is as far back. as I could find for gaming. That's not really useful, and I don't think any of us are going to remember anything from that time. So instead, we're going to look at when it was used in role-playing games, and the year that really comes up, that sticks out, is 1977, which for me is the year after I was born, and it's a much easier day for most of us really to talk about. What are other famous events from 1977? I would love to get your take on it if y'all have memories or thoughts on any of these.
I can think of one pretty prominent pop culture touchstone in 77, but if I say, I think Todd has to kick me off the stream.
Oh, now I'm curious.
Oh, no. I'm curious, too.
Star Wars, right?
Yeah, Star Wars.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
there.
that's true.
Yeah,
You know that? Well, that did not come up in my research. Now I feel like an idiot.
Yeah. 6-year-old me standing in line to see it for 2 hours to get in.
It's okay. We're talking about the original trilogy. That one is actually not on the session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, awesome. Good to know. Well, strangely enough, with that, how about the space shuttle, the Enterprise, which was named for the beloved ship, makes its first flight, launching the space shuttle program at NASA. Now, this was a terrestrial flight. They did not fly into outer space. It was just a test to actually make sure that the concept worked.
That's what the government wants you to think.
Very good point.
Boom. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of the last billionaire-funded flights.
Going from there, oh goodness, now this is a fun one. So I took courses in astronomy in college, but the rings of Uranus are discovered. Take that as you will for whatever dirty joke somebody wants to toss out there.
I'm insulted. You would think I would
How?
go somewhere yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how about this one? Steve Jobs incorporated Apple, and the first Apple II desktop computers were sold in the United States.
I used to work in marketing, and in marketing, we only acknowledge that the Mac started in 1984 with the Miss Ridley Scott commercial.
Great. I was born in 77. Those old Apple computers were the first ones that I used. You know, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so we never had our own computer until we were much older, but a friend of mine's mom was a very early graphic designer. She's one of the first. I got to see all these cool, graphic design programs when I was young, and it was really cool. I wasn't allowed to touch the computer, though. Not at all. There was a 5-foot radius around the computer that no children were allowed in, upon pain of death.
Yep. That year, 1977, Interpol required the copyright infringement warnings on videotapes, which affected videos worldwide. And we're seeing on them for the next few decades. Like, I had videotapes, I think everybody did, and you saw those old Interpol warnings, and which eventually, I guess, got replaced by FBI warnings here in the United States. But all of a sudden, that became a legal requirement. It's an early example of how one market can affect all others, which to me, the most recent one being Apple charging cables. They made it a law in Europe to basically switch over to the USB-C.
The exact date of that day coming up in 77 was my buddy's birthday in high school. So every time it came on, he was like, that's my birthday. That's my birthday. And I've never forgotten.
Well, that's one way to remember it, definitely. Now, the TCP IP tests were also this year, and the success of them became a major building block for what we now call the internet.
Oh, I thought that was the test that they had in Blade Runner.
When they sat down with the replicants?
Yeah.
Moving on now into some pop culture stuff, definitely. Sarah Michelle Gellar, Fiona Apple, and John Cena were all born this year. Fleetwood Mac and David Bowie both released their 11th album that year in 1977. So, any Bowie fans here?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Huge. Got to see him live in 2004.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
I am jealous.
Yeah. Final thing that I've got here. We have that the British punk band, the Sex Pistols, and The Clash released their debut albums in 1977. So, let's talk about the D12. There have been those in past who have used it, tried to release games with it, and been successful. Grognardia Games, Rogue Games, both released D12 systems. And strangely enough, I'm going to mention Genesis, the Star Wars system, has a D12 that is a part of it. But those games are either not as popular on the current market, or they're intended to use proprietary dice, like the Genesis does. But I definitely think that they do deserve a salute before we get into this topic much further. My esteemed guests here, I'm curious, what was your inspiration for some of you with using the D12 for your game mechanic? Michael, you are known for your love of the D12.
Absolutely. There's no rationale behind it. There's no like objective statement, but subjectively, I do think the D12 is the best polyhedral. It's got a good heft to it. It's got a good weight. It feels good in the hand. It rolls well. It's got a good tumble action. And I just think it's, like, again, just for the vibes, it's just totally most fun dice to roll. So the basis of my game was literally how many D12s can I get people to roll before they realize I'm just screwing with them? And that was where my game started. It eventually got to an actual game, but on the journey was just 12 D12, 15 D12. Let's see what happens. But just because I think more games should use the D12, I just literally made a game to get people to roll it more.
Connor, Coyote and Crow, what was yours?
Yeah, so similarly, I love the D12. I love, again, like I said, the heft of it, the way it rolls, the way it tumbles. Physically, it's a good die. But then there was the whole idea that I really wanted my dice to tie in thematically with what I was trying to do with Coyote and Crow, which was sort of step away from colonialism and try to craft my own path, as it were. And so the first thing I knew is I didn't want to lean on older systems. I didn't want to lean on D20 or sort of tried and true systems. And to me, the D12 is the most underused, underserved, and simultaneously one of the most flexible dice out there as far as number, as far as probability, as far as the flexibility of use within a system. So to me, it just called out to be used. I couldn't think of another big mainstream system outside of Genesis, which you mentioned, that was using the D12. For me, it was right away. I knew I wanted it to be D12 based. Not to mention, it's always been a personal favorite. It's just always a personal.
For me, like everyone else here, I stand my lonely dodecahedron. It's always been a favorite. Always tried to find some way to roll it when I was playing D&D. And my first D12 only game, or primarily D12 game, was the Tefra steampunk role-playing game.
Yeah.
And that was the last one I played. That was D12 only. That wasn't one of mine.
I played that too, but it's been a long time, yes.
Yeah, it's been an eternity, I swear. But it's one of those, when I was getting into game design and, played a ton, play tested a ton, I saw the D20 and the ways it swings back and forth and just has all that variability. Same thing with like the D6 systems. I felt like there wasn't enough variance in the D6. The D8 was close, but not quite. The D10 is used so often that I just didn't want to embrace tradition. Nah, I'm just going to go off over here and do the weirdo thing, which I think a lot of us gamers, and especially us developers, tend to do every once in a while. I mean, I'm getting a couple nods here. So that's what I did when I wrote Ghast Bashers. I wanted a game, like before I wrote Ghast Bashers even, I was helping a friend write a D6 game, and then I said, you know what, I need to write a D12 now. And when I was looking at all the other game dice options, and people were saying, well, why don't you use a D20? Why don't you use a D10? And in all my testing, I learned that the D12 gave me just that extra touch of variance that I wanted to make my numbers not overbearing while still being a wide enough range that you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Plus, any game that you can literally look at the face and go, hey, that's a pentagon. So there's a pentagram in there. Let's run a supernatural game with this. Let's go.
Actually, I just remembered the last time I played a D12 game, sorry to jump in here, is I played a Powered by the Apocalypse game, but I used D12s instead because they're just inherently better.
Oh, wow. That's a great idea. I love that.
Well, that's actually what inspired one of the games I have coming up, but I'll leave that alone. We'll get to that.
In this discussion, because of how D12s work in your game, Todd, I'm kind of curious, what was your leaning with that?
For me, it was very much inspired by Earth Dawn, which was, aside from the World of Darkness game, like the first one that I had played after overindulging on D&D. And that one has this kind of step-up system where you create dice pools as skills and abilities go up in level. But that whole idea of using the dice as a measurement of your ability, strength, power really has resonated with. And it's not even something that I wasn't even consciously aware that I've been doing until recently when preparing for this episode, where it was just like, holy crap. It's okay, I can use that word. Yeah. Holy crap, that's what I've been doing this entire time. And so for me, it has been part of this natural progression of stepping up the die. Start with 4, and if you get a little better, it goes to 6, D8, and D10, and then a D12. Without getting into the Zatoichi, the Zoichi, or whichever, dice set, That's the problem when everything is just written in text in front of you. You have no idea how to pronounce it. Boy, has that been a problem in my life. But without getting into those far more obscure dice, you have this giant jump, D12, 20. And so for me, the D12 was just the natural progression of that's the peak. When you're rolling the D12, it is something where it is a progression of, so I've always used it as a pinnacle that you're working towards, except in the case of Pandora Total Destruction, it's actually the worst possible dice you can roll. Because in that game, you're basically playing superpowered people with very destructive powers, and the higher you roll, the more collateral damage you do, the more problems it actually creates. But for me, it's always been part of this natural progression, stepping up the dice, with the D12 being the cap, where it's like, there, we end it with here because it's all part of this nice natural progression without having to get super mathematical.
I actually had a couple questions that some of y'all have this kind of naturally gone into, but I'm kind of curious with all this, like, what has been the player reaction to using the D12 in the game?
Before I even go into the player reaction, I just want to touch base on a comment that the warden made about, like, it was the progression, and my brain immediately just registered, this is what peak performance looks like. You know, that meme of, you know, here's this thing, this is what peak performance looks like, this is the ideal body, this is...
Yeah,
yep,
there we go,
Yeah.
This is what peak performance looks like. You may not like it, but this is facts.
Yeah.
That said...
It's very chiseled, it's very defined, it has incredibly broad shoulders. I mean, there's no mistaking. You know,
and you gotta appreciate the curves it has.
Yep. The number of times I've had players...
Layers. It is layers.
Yep.
The number of times I've seen players mix up a D10 with a D8, you know, it's kind of like, I can kind of see that. They're somewhat kind of identical, but the D12 basically kind of bursts into the room. It's like the handsome quarterback that shows up to the party. It's just be like, who is that?
Or the Kool-Aid man.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Kool-Aid man. Yeah. When the D12 shows up, someone's doing some brickwork.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. But to go back to the original question before I derailed it, like I tend to do, the player reaction started off with, "What the hell am I doing?" Like, you know, just the sheer confusion, because I every time I've run demos at cons or I was running play tests, the majority of my player base was coming in from D&D or Pathfinder or some variant thereupon. And, you know, and sometimes they might have been experienced with a game like 7th Sea or Legend of the Five Rings or Shadowrun, where they're rolling a different die and it's only that one type, but it was pretty rare. So when they were like, wait, I'm only rolling a 12-sider? Yep, you're only rolling 12-siders. You know, you're rolling up to 5 of them in this case. And they're like, wait, what? And it's just... It was harder to explain the use of the D12 than it was to explain that they were rolling low instead of rolling high. Because Gas Bashers is a roll low, not a roll high, which is its own learning curve for some players. But the D12 is usually the bigger shock than the roll low.
But that's interesting. Like, I personally seek out, just because I've been gaming for so long, and I've played so much, like, D&D and World of Darkness and stuff like that. I intentionally seek out games like that use like exclusively D12s or something like that, because I want that challenge. I want to see what it's like. I want the experience to. But there is sometimes it does get, especially when you're super used to rolling high. The roll low can be a bit of a wait, what? But only rolling one kind of die, like, yeah, I'm cool with that. It's fun.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I had fewer folks who were bothered by the D12 than I did folks who were bothered by the fact that they didn't have enough D12s for my game. It's a dice pool, so they're like, I've only got one. Whoever has more than one D12. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That, like, even in the D&D days, where basically, if it wasn't the D20, they were effect dice. They were the things that you used to do damage and everything with. But what weapons actually did a D12? If I remember correctly, it was a battle axe, and even then, it may have been the two-handed battle axe. So yeah, when it comes to the D12, you're more inclined to find someone that's got a bunch of D8s and D4s. But when it comes to the D12s, more often than not, there's not enough in their box to go around with. And it doesn't matter how heavy their, their Crown Royal bag of dice is. there's never enough D12s in there because there's never enough reason to have it other than, well, it came with the set that I...
Yeah.
I think my first experience was the Barbarian rolled D12 for hit points in first edition AD&D.
Yeah.
And then there was one weapon that rolled the D12, and I exclusively went Barbarian in that weapon for that reason. So I have a question. This is off topic subject, so John, feel free to yell at me.
Yeah, no,
but,
feel free.
But something Librarian had mentioned, I'm currently tinkering with a game design right now that's going to use a lot of D12, shocker. And I want it to be designed so that the 12 is like it's a roll high system. But I have found that I keep having to work against the mechanics because it seems like it makes more sense to make it roll low. Is that just me being dumb, wild? Like, is there any mathematical or mechanical sense to that? Because like I'll have other dice that people will roll, and maybe the D12 is like the target number. So if I roll a 5 on the D12, I have to get higher than a 5 on the D8. But as I'm trying to like go through the different permutations, it seems like rolling under makes more sense, but I want it to be over because I want that 12 to mean something.
Hey, I mean, in my experience, I'm just going to hop in because,
Sure.
I kind of started this. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
I went with roll low on gas bashers because of how I built the rest of the mechanics, where, your stats are what you're rolling under, and that number goes down as the adventure progresses, so it gets progressively harder to do things the longer you push your luck. So rolling low made sense for that. And some of the other ideas I was kicking around, roll low still worked because I was cribbing from things like the Modifius 2d20 system, Das Warzog, the Dark Eye from, the German game there. Looking at those, I'm like, okay, roll low just makes sense. And that's also because I wanted to go against the whole, I rolled a die, added a mod, and this is my ungodly number, and that's it. So that's why I went the route I did. But my next game, or one of the games I'm working on, Wea Boomers, uses 2d12 added together rolling high, and your goal is 13, specifically 13 is going to be your ideal number, or any number divisible by 13, because of the nod of old school anime usually having 13 episodes or being divisible by 13. So, and cool. Again, that's where the D12 comes back in, because when I was looking at the idea of, here's a gimmick I want, what die can handle it? I'm like, maybe I could do a 3d6, I could probably do a d20 or so, but the d12 just really drove that home for me. And most of the other games I write, the d12 is still the highest die you will roll, because again, that is peak performance, whether you like it or not. So I found that, it can go in either direction, high or low. It's just a matter of what you want your game to do, what themes and motifs you're playing with, and how those mechanics work with the story you're telling. But that's my game design philosophy in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that form and mechanics coming out of a purpose is, in my opinion, a big part of gaming and what I like and what I look for. Like, I want my mechanics to have a sense to it. And I think when a game does that well, it just shines. It shines out and people are drawn to it. But how about for the rest of y'all? I mean, because Anthony's bringing it up, like, how has working with the D12 kind of influenced how you approach maybe future game projects as well? Connor, you do have a future project coming very soon.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, the basic concept of using the D12 and with a dice pool kind of mechanic led me to, for this expansion specifically, for interesting ways to try to come up with evolutions of that mechanic, where I've always been a person who never liked all the tables in D&D. I always wanted to find a way to play the game without having to continually open the book. So for me, my game mechanics often lean toward, how do I create a simple solution that everybody can grok quickly at the table and get to rolling dice and playing the game without having to reference charts. So for this expansion, we came up with this whole list of like rumors and bits of information that NPCs might have. And I didn't want to just have a table to roll randomly. So instead, I was trying to find ways to come up with using the D12 with social interaction mechanics that would lead to the better you're doing, the more information you're getting, or the more accurate information you're getting. And I think we're fairly successful with that in the way that it's coming out. But I just, again, going back to that number variability with the D12, I think for me it's crucial because it's divisible by so many ways. like just mathematically, it really lines up. It's by the way, it's also the reason that in world the people of Coyote and Crow use a duodecimal math system. Is that I wanted the number 12 to be important to the characters as well as the players. So the people of this world use a base 12 math system, and I think it just like you were mentioning earlier, the idea that tying your mechanics into your world building can really be helpful for players immerse themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what's really interesting about you were saying the base 12?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I think it's ancient Sumerian, but some of the most ancient people had a counting system. Your thumb is your counter, and you count the sections of your finger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's right there. It's built right in. Yep. And I think that's really fun. That you considered that, a thing that humans have actually done, and they were able to build like a really complex mathematical system out of that. And
if you strip out some of the basic things that we assume are 10 because of fingers, if you think about like hours of the day, seasons of the year, all those things are divisible by 12 or can be interacted with 12.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually had a question for you guys too. If you think, does your choice of dice affect thematically? And I think you were saying obviously you built that right in, but like. Did it intentionally affect it thematically, or did you end up discovering that you were sort of trying to work the 12 in later? Did it like start out that way, or was it like a...
For me, anyway, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but for me, it was a decision early on in my process. I right away, like one of the first things I thought of with a role-playing game is what is my dice system going to look like? And immediately I knew that a pool-based system, I know you mentioned World of Darkness earlier, I'm a huge vampire fan from way back, that the way that those dice worked for me in helping create a story and creating an environment rather than just giving a binary result, I knew was immediately something I wanted. So for me, it was the early decision to go with a pool of D12, and then it was sort of backwards figuring out finding other ways I can incorporate that thematically into the world building.
Anybody else got an answer on that? I mean, Michael?
As I said before, I started from I want people to roll D12s. Like that was the first step in my game, and then the game came out of that. Though it did influence the name. The name is Action 12 Cinema. I'll plug that here. And it's just because it's supposed to like inspire like those old Saturday afternoon action movie blocks you might see on like TBS, WGN stations. But 12 could either be the station because I think 12 was my WGN station as a kid, but also the D12 dice. So Action 12 Cinema. The D12 literally, without the D12, my game would not exist. I wouldn't have made it if there wasn't a D12 in the world.
Yeah, but do you think would you consider the D12 a very serious dice, or is it like kind of wacky, or is it a horror dice, or is it like a?
I think it's the misunderstood loner.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
The weirdo in the back of the cafeteria that nobody really talks to.
It's the hero we need. So when stuff happens, that loner is going to step forward and save the day.
For sure. I like it.
Yeah, personally, I can't help but think that the way that the D20, like I have a D20 tattoo on my arm, and the idea behind that is just be like, if somebody sees it, I'm going to know if they recognize what it is in a significant way. And that was back in, I hate to say back in the day, but it's like the D20 was kind of this symbol of the role-playing culture. And because it has become so prevalent, so pervasive, in my own personal opinion, and now that, particularly with the success of Critical Role and just D&D as a general whole, being able to find mostly D20-based games in a bookstore, and then also going to the 2000s with D20 Boom, Glut, however you want to look at it, depending on the year that you're looking at from, gets to a point where now the D20 is a much more recognized symbol. And so now it almost kind of feels like the D12 has become this almost kind of like counterculture aspect within the tabletop community, in the sense where it just be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're still just working with D20s. Well, we've moved past that, and we have
and
gone
on my level
to the D12. Yes, exactly. It's just been like, that is so adorable that you think the D20 is the one and only way to resolve magic. let me sit you down and show me the D12.
True.
I know you think of it as
Yeah.
the battle axe die, but it actually does so much more. So I do think, and especially too, because now there is so much opportunity for people to make, like in the indie space and stuff like that, crowdfunding and so many other resources and everything that's available, you really have to start thinking outside the box in order to do something that's neat and that stands out in a way that just isn't clone of something else in some way, shape, or form. Where you're not just like, well, it's like this, but our feat system works different. Kind of like, yeah, but we kind of did that 10 years ago. Just seems to be a part of the design evolution. And when you think about the fact of the D12 being the overlooked one, it just kind of seems natural now to just be like, okay, well, now let's really pay attention to it. It's kind of like it was the neglected child in the dice bag for the longest time. And now we're super focused. And in doing so, I think we're starting to see that it is much more stable, especially when you're working with dice pool mechanics, you know, anything else like that. The D20 is now just way too kind of wild. It's been there and it's done that. I think we've done about as much as we could possibly do, other than my game is based on whether or not you can take your D20, throw it out the window without breaking glass. That's how you know if you succeed. I think that's the only way that we can do something different with it at this point. And now there's this big, shiny, well-musculared D12 that is just kind of like, you. No one's been paying attention to you, you son of a bitch.
Everybody gets a turn, or else.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and, we've had a few moments here where we've talked about the D12, but let's talk about the properties that do use the D12. Who would like to kick us off?
Well, I'm totally shameless. So my game is Action 12 Cinema. Again, that's amazing art on the cover. It's a D12 with Spaceman coming out of it. Yep. It is a D12 dice pool system. It's a GMless game. Uses all kinds of charts. The D12 is used pretty much throughout the entire. It's the only die you roll. You roll it all the time. And you'll create an outline of a bad action movie. And then you play through that. Basically, whatever you say happens. The dice just determine if what happened actually moved you forward in the scene or not. So it's very improv friendly. 12s explode and they do all kinds of cool stuff. So when you roll a 12, it's just like the most amazing thing in the world and you get to roll more dice. But there's a meta level built in that whenever there's a mistake, then you just wrap that into, well, we lost the permit, so we had to move locations. The actor got fired, so that's why the accent's different. So all the things that happens in a normal game where you forget things or just whatever, that's built in to be part of the humor of the story. So these are bad, not good. These are bad action movies. Yeah.
So you get built-in plot holes, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, it's built in and intentional when that happens, rather than I just can't hold an accent for more than 2 sentences. So.
Nice. So when
It's
you say
available now
bad,
in
you
print.
mean... Yeah, you mean misunderstood. Basically, when you say bad, you mean kind of like, underappreciated cinema.
Underappreciated.
Appreciate, definitely.
Yeah.
Who else wants to toss out a property? Or if you want me to, I can toss out one of the ones I have over here.
You should probably toss one out so it's not just us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, how about...
Yeah, space them out.
I'm going to toss out, then, the One Ring. I kind of like this game, and this is the Cubicle 7 version of it. The property has now traded hands off to Free League. Free League is now publishing it, but it is an RPG. It's owned by the UK board game company Sophisticated Games, which develops and packages all non-movie The Lord of the Ring games under a license from Middle-earth Enterprises. Absolutely huge property. And their primary title is the War of the Ring mini army war game. This is a phenomenal game. It does use the D12, and I think the artwork, layout, everything is a beautiful game, and there's something about the Tolkien universe that, whatever you think of it, problematic as it is for its age, it does have a place within the gaming community and the fantasy community that kind of love it. I have not taken a good look at the Free League game, but I was a huge fan when it was with Cubicle 7, and some great writers that worked with them. So next up, who would like to toss in?
I'm game. I'll go for it because it's been put on the list and I've been seeing it pop up over these last couple of weeks of prep. So Pandora Total Destruction, which is the last one that I've published. Oh, and look at that. And John's even holding up. Oh, and look at this to show how prepared I am for everything. Look, I'm going to hold up a copy.
There you go.
Boom. So
Awesome.
Pandora, as I've mentioned before, is a game of overpowered supers who are learning to actually control their powers. And one of the main inspirations of it, like anything in geek culture, was based on a tirade that I got into all of a sudden one day at a con breakfast where I was saying was just like, how can you say search your feelings and suddenly know how to shoot lasers out of your frickin' eyeball? And the whole idea of, I thought that it was a really interesting challenge of taking something where there is no muscle memory, there's no reflex. You can't even rely on your parents on how to teach you how to use a particular power, even if they themselves are superpowered. So the idea behind it was I wanted to create something where rolling over the target number was actually worse than rolling under the target. So in this particular case, it's basically the d12 is quote unquote the worst that you could possibly roll when it comes to power, because you're rolling a die that represents the type of action that you're taking, which you assign a die type to it. D12 being the worst, meaning it's like this is the one that could get out of control. There are 3 different action types: conflict, detection, and there's interaction. By assigning the D12 to one of those 3, you're determining which one of those 3 situations you want to be the most trouble. So if you want it to be something where protecting other people is where you have the most trouble with, that's where you would actually put D12. Everybody, when you start the game, you have what's known as overpower die. And it's basically, you're using your power for that? Add your overpower die to the roll. And it always starts at D12. Over the course of the game, you will take on training scene where you will have the opportunity, if things go well, or even if they go okay. It's not like, as soon as you roll over, that's it. You're allowed a certain amount of havoc, which are points that you basically spend on these various options. Too much havoc, and no, forget it. This is not going to go well. Do not consider this a success. But a couple of points of havoc, it's doable. Sure, that business owner is going to have to make a large insurance claim before they can reopen again. But that still means that you're able to shoot Dr. Evil and thwart their efforts. So it starts as a D12 and you're able to start lowering down. The goal is to never get it where you have absolute control of your power, because there's this great evil that's starting to build, and so you've got a bit of a time crunch going. The idea is that you have it under control enough that you can go and fight the villain to thwart their master plan without making things too much worse.
I really like that concept. I think that's really interesting. I can't think of another game that does something like that. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
My opinion is obviously incredibly biased as well, but I think so too. I think it's genius, to tell you the truth. But as we all do with our own games, it's like over the course of it, what was really interesting when the residential school crisis came about in Canada here, when there were mass graves that were starting to be discovered, and we as a country really were kind of slapped across the face and finally had to come to a reckoning with our own past and this quote-unquote education system. At that same time is when I discovered that my great-uncle was actually part of what was known then as the Ministry of Indian Affairs. And he had a more direct involvement in the residential school system. He is actually listed 3 times in the appendix of the Truth and Reconciliation. And so right after, I had just crowdfunded this project, and it was like, because in Pandora, if you display empowerment, as it's known in the game, you are forced to attend these institutions. Well, the parallel was unmistakable. And so it was one of those things where I really had to face the issue of, well, do I completely change what this is all about? Or do I actually lean into it and say, no, this is a thing where it's like, this is an opportunity to basically take a supers RPG and use it to basically discuss forced institutionalization, which is not just a residential school thing. Take a look at the Uyghurs in China and other kind of areas like this. There's so many around the world. And so in doing so, having the D12 and this kind of sense of you want to be able to get out of this institution, but they won't let you unless you meet the perfect definition of citizen. It didn't just fit things from an action component. It now started to fit things from a more emotional and cultural kind of component to it that, ironically enough, solved one of the biggest problems that I had with the game, which is during the early playtesting, everyone was like, I don't see why my character's parents would allow me to be here. Like, I'm sure that, like I could just file a complaint. I could call a lawyer. I could call this agency and I'd be out of here in a heartbeat. And all these people would be sued. I don't understand why they would allow this to happen. But then as soon as I was basically able to say it's just like, no, this is basically the empowered equivalent of residential schools, they were like, gotcha. And then it was never a question that came as a result of it.
Yeah.
So,
Damn.
yeah, it's not just a way of basically saying like, oh, this is a really good way to be able to kind of manage how action works in a particular game. It is basically a way where it creates a controlled but yet still wild enough variable to create these social, economic, cultural issues that you want to put into the game if that's what you want to do with it, versus something that is really kind of neat and tidy, D6s or 8s or something like that, far more controlled.
In the sake of, I also do want to take a brief moment because it is kind of we got on a heavy topic there a moment. Is everybody good to continue?
Yeah.
Everybody good? All right.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll mention another property then that does use a D12. Moving forward, an interesting topic, Black Void. These are their words. I wanted to use their words since I don't have anybody on here to represent them. Embark on an epic journey through a treacherous and mysterious cosmos in the immersive role-playing game. As a descendant of Earth survivors, navigate a vast universe filled with exotic life forms, eccentric beings, and otherworldly entities. What Black Void is, going back to the time of ancient cultures, Sumerian, Babylon, things of that, the Earth is destroyed. So the Earth is utterly wiped out, and through cosmic portals, humanity makes its way to another world. And you find yourself on an alien landscape amongst alien races, being an alien yourself. The gameplay is kind of scientific barbarian meets Call of Cthulhu, is the best way I can put it. So you got cosmic horror, but at the same time you have this idea of alien worlds, far-flung ideas through the cosmos. Black Void is now out on its own. They, again, are a system that uses the D12. There is that one as well out there. And now I'm going to toss it back to our esteemed panel here. Toss another game out there. Connor,
Yeah, you already have your book in
you got
hand.
that book in your hand, I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have mine. Go for it.
Yeah. Got to throw my own out there. Yeah, Coyote and Crow, D12 system, dice pool system. Certainly, if any of you have played any World of Darkness or Vampire, you're going to recognize the general idea there of the success pool. I tried to keep it slim and more skill-focused rather than stat-focused. So most players are rolling 2 to 3 on average, 2 to 3 D12, plus a number of D12 equal to their skill rank in a related skill to that stat. So you end up rolling around 4 to 6 D12 at a time. It does have an exploding dice element, so we have 2 colored dice in there. There's standard dice and critical dice. The critical, if you get critical, you get not only a double success from that die, but you also have the chance to unlock story events or special abilities for certain weapons. And I tried to keep it, like I said before, I tried to keep it as table-friendly as possible, keep the story going as fluidly as possible, with as few stops to check rules or charts as possible in the game. I really was trying personally to tie in some of my background and my culture with indigenous storytelling and the idea of that feeling you get of telling a ghost story or telling a cool story around a campfire, keeping it away from more like miniatures focused, number crunching kind of role playing, which again, I think the D12 is just wonderful for. I think, as we mentioned before, it not only has that variability, but I think unlike with, say, like 2d6, you don't have as much of a bell curve to worry about, right? You've got just as much chance to roll a 1 as you do a 12. You can parse that out a little bit more and have a little more variability within that same framework, as where 2d6, you're going to start running into problems really quickly. Or maybe not problems, but you've got a different set of variables to be working with 2d6.
You have to build around the fact that you're going to hit the middle more often.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't want to overcomplicate it. So I think sticking with the D12, where you've got, that's the other thing I wanted to call out that I don't think anybody's mentioned yet, is we were going as much as we could for accessibility. And so I love the fact that the number faces on D12 are really easy to read. There's no counting pips. There's no trying to figure out on a D4 like what number's up. It's nice and simple and easy to read.
That's really cool. I love games where I get to learn about culture too. Like I love games that involve, some depth.
Same.
Because I get to pick up on I get to learn something new, and that's awesome to me. I love that. The whole World of Darkness thing, like that was, to me, having experienced only like fairly heavy, D20 games with very crunchy rules, and then all of a sudden, I opened up this vampire book and it was like, I was like, it's about acting. And okay, so you roll some dice, and then you act, and then you roll some dice, and then you act, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to I don't want to do math. I want to play. I want to, I wanted to play like I did on the playground when I was a kid.
Yep.
I love that, I think, obviously, everybody's game, that I've heard so far I think there's way more of a focus on that these days. I think so many people are just not afraid of that anymore. We're not afraid to get into it. We're just afraid to have fun with it and just get into it. Yeah. I'll be there.
Well, I definitely, I want to give an opportunity, if possible. Connor, if you want to mention that Kickstarter coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is our first full expansion book that's coming out. It's a setting book, and rather than going big and broad as far as a geographical expansion book, we're focusing on a single small remote village called Ahutiko. So Ahutiiko is Ahutiko. And we're launching on July 16th. So we've got a few weeks left. The preview page is up. We've got one live action trailer already up. And then we've got our full Kickstarter video coming out in a couple of weeks. Really excited about it. We're doing a lot of unusual stuff with it. It's a mystery book that is meant to be a series of locations, story hooks, mysteries, legends, and lore kind of mixed in, but it's not sort of a linear story adventure like a traditional, say, like a D&D module where you're going from point A to point B. Instead, all these NPCs, there's more than 40 NPCs in the book, and they've got a whole bunch of different conflicting information. So some people have the truth, some people have bits of truth, some people have lies that they can tell you. And there's also a lot of hidden information in the game. There's a whole cryptographic thing we've done in the book where one of the characters has hidden cryptographic information that will lead to clues online, multimedia clues, everything from music to extra art and all kinds of stuff. So I'm really excited about
that. Sounds exciting.
Cool.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, before I get to our last property that I can talk about, I wanted to toss it to Anthony and Anthony, let you talk about your game.
I actually have a double header here because, there's one that is already fully produced, in print, ready to go, which is my baby Ghast Bashers, my little quirky book here. So, as I mentioned earlier, it is my D12 powered comedy horror role-playing game inspired exactly by what you think. So it's a game that I wanted to write that combined elements of Ghostbusters, SCP, Warehouse 13, The Librarians, where you are paranormal inspectors and exterminators, as the case may be, and going out and trying to deal with the various supernatural elements of the world. Again, uses D12 and a sliding scale of comedy and horror. So if you wanted to run your scene from Cabin in the Woods where your SWAT team is getting murdered by whatever depraved monsters are hiding there, sure, you can do that. But if the worst thing that happens in your life is you got slimed and you just really need a shower and some Chinese food, then there you go. You got that sliding scale to match what you need. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's a D12 roll low. You have 3 stats, 9 skills, so pretty easy to pick up. And as you are performing actions and fail, or you get hurt, or things go wrong, your stats temporarily go down. So as the game progresses, it's actually getting harder for you to succeed. And since you're racing against a mechanic called the town clock, literally as the game progresses, a number ticks on. At the end of a scene, the GM rolls a die. If it is that number or less, the town clock ticks. The big bad does something drastic. So Old Man Jenkins that you were going to be meeting tomorrow, well, he's missing now. And you have to constantly play that debate of, do you take the time to rest and recover, or do you keep pushing your luck to beat the clock? So it's a weird combination of tension against the clock and against the big bad, finish your investigation so you can defeat it. While also, again, you can have those elements of comedy that you see in things like Ghostbusters or The Librarians or Warehouse 13. You could be your independent contractors, or you could be from the Bureau of Paranormal Inspection, the BPI logo right there. That was my whole premise behind Gas Bashers. Just a quirky game, very easy to pick up. Only like 30 pages are actual like needed rules, and the rest of it is fluff and GM tips. So, it's a game I wrote to have read in an afternoon and be able to play it that night, buy it the first day of a con, run it the second day, and also be accessible material-wise. This book, some pencils, paper, and 5d12 are all you need, because I put a cap in there to make it easier for people who don't have a Crown Royal bag full of d12s ready to go.
And can't make it to a convention.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't have a Crown Royal bag. I have a little wooden chest. I have 10 d12. I just went through and found
Nice.
There we go.
You're all set.
I'm ready to go.
Now you know what games to buy.
Yep. Then to go ahead and hit the other side of my doubleheader, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead,
it's a
please.
game that the quick start is still out and available on my website, and I think I put it on DriveThruRPG. I'll need to double check. It's on itch.io. After a while, I'll start blurring together of where did I put it. But the game was launched on a Kickstarter last year. It didn't succeed on funding, and I've been working on getting it finished and trying to fund what I can out of pocket or do a second Kickstarter later. But the game is called Weeaboomers. In it, you are an old school anime fan who's well past middle-aged. Your animal companion that talks didn't come to you at age 8 with your ability to turn to a magical girl. Instead, it waited until you were 30 coming out of a PTA meeting. You weren't imbued with spiritual powers at 14. Instead, you had your near miss with death at 47 because you stayed too late in the office and fell asleep behind something you shouldn't have. Now you have your crazy spirit powers. You didn't have 5 hot aliens crash into your house to live with you when you were 18. Instead, that happened when you are 47 and you are working way too many hours at the office. You still have to go and deal with the
When do I get mine, man? I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
Right?
I'm way overdue for mine.
But that was the entire premise behind it. I wanted this tongue-in-cheek, quirky nod to all this old-school anime from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I wanted people that grew up with the pre-Tom Toonami block to feel at home just as much as the people who got up at 5 in the morning to go ahead and catch Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball, the original, or Darkstalkers. That whole idea of, yes, we're old, yes, we're tired, but if we were handed anime powers, we would totally do some cool stuff. But we also still have to deal with our responsibilities, too. So the game was just this tongue-in-cheek comedy, deal with real life, whether it's your day job, your moderate to severe back pain and depression, and family responsibilities, while also saving the world at 5 o'clock. Again, goal was another easy-to-pick-up, narrative-focused, and it's a 2d12 system that you roll your 2d12 and compare it to a table similar to Powered by the Apocalypse game. So it's 2d6 first table. Well, now it's 2d12. Your goal is 13 for your best effects, but I wanted to have a bigger variance than just your 2d6, because I took the Powered by the Apocalypse motif and said, well, what if I added a critical system for critical success and critical failure? What about the yes but and no but, as well as yes and no and? I wanted to just really expand on that and have that back and forth, and that's what I did with Weeaboomers.
Nice.
So those are the D12 games that I have in print or in production. Other games coming out will be using D12s, but just not entirely.
So that prompts another question, completely off subject. So John, feel free to yell at me.
We digress.
ENnie, I'd like for everyone to answer who wants to, but obviously there's no obligation. You are handed a giant bag of money. There are 0 legal implications or issues. You can make a game from any IP. Any IP.
Oh no!
What IP are you picking?
Ooh,
That's
my brain
tough.
I
can't even
immediately
handle that
know.
question.
I immediately know, and it's one I've actually already been trying to like muscle in on behind the scenes, and I'm almost there. Horizon Zero Dawn, the video game Horizon Zero Dawn.
Dang, yeah.
I really want to. I want to design that, and I want to shoehorn D12s in there.
Oh yeah, definitely have to have a D12 in there, of course. That's what I was saying. All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody else have an answer?
That's a really tough one. Like, there's so many things that I love. I mean, I know vampires are super, super overdone. I don't care. As the Lady of Manners says, embrace your cliches. If you haven't seen the new Interview with the Vampire TV series,
Heard it's wonderful.
amazing. I think it might be fun to do something, based around that and, maybe not get sued. And I think it might be fun to play it, but to maybe do it as like a long game where you set stuff up and you actually it's centuries go by, as you play this game. Maybe that might be fun. I don't know if any vampire games that involve sort of long term.
Yeah.
I've seen other games do that long term, but not a vampire game.
Yeah, see, and it lends to it, right? You're immortal. You're supposed to already be several hundred years old. What you got going on here? Let's go.
You need a flashback and a flash forward mechanic.
Yeah. That would because there's flashbacks in Stagged Heroism. It's like a moment where you get a hint as to, you remember a past situation and it gives you a hint as to sort of what to do going forward. So, but if you had a flash forward too, that would be fun because you could also work backwards from, you're trapped in the house with the, evil vampire and then, oh boy, it was sure lucky of us we got out of that house, and then you have to sort of work backwards from how you did that. That would be fun. Yeah.
Todd, Anthony, you have a question?
Yeah, for me, and we actually were just talking about this on, we just recorded our latest episode of Covenstead, the podcast I'm doing, and we had Craig Campbell on actually as a guest. The one that I would love to do, Kingdom, which is a show on Netflix based out of Korea, where basically it's, it's a zombie apocalypse kind of show, but it has political intrigue in. And I'm just an absolute sucker for that show. I still, on an almost weekly basis, check to see if there's an announcement that season 3 is coming.
Yeah.
But that is one that I would love to do. But and the viewpoint of just yes, and that's what happened in Korea. But what if the person that basically made the zombie apocalypse happen ended up being able to kind of spread the word on how to create the undead, and it roamed into other parts of the world? That's the one. It's if I'm very personally anti-IP. To me, it's just I get what it does as far as making things popular, considering the fact of having gone through this of the D&D era and stuff like that, where it's just no, we're not supposed to be popular.
Yeah.
The whole idea of making something that is popular in the RPG medium, to me, is almost kind of redundant.
Yeah. If it was me, I'm a weird dude. I made a game.
This is a safe space, John.
Yes. Straight up, I would be Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I know who I am. Todd, I'm so sorry. But here's where that money comes.
Embrace your cliches.
Yeah. Embrace your cliches, right? Embrace who you are. And I would use that money. You said, Michael, you said the money.
Not mega money.
I'm getting the original cast and crew together, which would include George Clooney.
Yep. Your Kickstarter video would be him. Yeah, exactly. Anthony, do you have an answer?
I'm actually at a toss-up between two, because one of them is, very niche, and the other one is a different type of niche, but at least is more mainstream. Video game series called Phantasy Star.
Okay, yep.
Because I'm a sucker for sci-fantasy, not just sci-fi, but sci-fantasy, where you get all of the fantasy tropes and all the sci-fi tropes and throw them together. You got sci-fi in my fantasy, you got fantasy in my sci-fi. No, I want them both. I want elves throwing magic side by side with cyborgs with laser cannons, with a dude who's wearing crazy armor with a billowing cape and the epic sword.
Yes.
I want all of that.
If it looks good, spray painted on the side of a van.
Yes.
Yeah.
The thing is, Phantasy Star leaned into that. It really changed things up, because if I remember correctly, it was the first video game RPG published that had a female protagonist. It made some ripples with that. And then the franchise has grown in crazy directions over the years, but it always had that sci-fantasy element, and the lore of it is all over the place. If you actually try looking at the old lore, there's time travel, there's interdimensional stuff, there's bioengineering and magic. It's just all this great stuff. I'm I want all the lore, so I'd use that bag of money to get all of the lore that we never got, so I can go ahead and actually properly publish a game. But the other side of the coin is a different fandom of mine, which is Japanese tokusatsu. So I'm talking like Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, Ultraman. Like, one of my games, Dualities, was inspired by that. And the first game that I wrote with a friend of mine was Prisma Paladins, which was part of a bigger project we were doing for Tokusatsu, because we both really love Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, and of course became American Power Rangers. And, just we think that there's certain things that were very prevalent in the Japanese version that isn't as prevalent in the American version, and we want to lean on those tropes, which is why I'm saying, like, that's what I would do. Not a Power Rangers game, but a Japanese tokusatsu, specifically in, like, the Kamen Rider Super Sentai theme, because there's things in the Japanese versions that just work. So yeah, those would be the two I'd be stuck behind. Either crazy over-the-top spandex, martial arts explosion shows, or sci fantasy that I just can't get enough of. Thus my debate.
Yeah.
Because, then you get Voltron, which is the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice.
You could fight me on that one, but Voltron definitely is like the fine line between the two. That is like the Venn diagram for these two fandoms.
Nice.
I have two as well. Pirates of Darkwater.
Ooh, good choice.
Oh,
Good choice.
yes.
I would love to actually see a game that actually is better than what was already released. With all the lore.
And if not that, Wacky Races, the old Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes, that would be so much fun.
Oh,
That would be bonkers. I love it. Like that old Toon RPG, but like wackier. Yeah.
Wacky Races. I think that's an IP that is ripe for exploitation. I mean,
Absolutely.
Merchandisation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And points to you for calling out Toon. I don't know of any other person who remembers the Toon RPG besides me.
It was so much fun.
You found your
I
people,
actually
my
used
friend.
I used it in college. I went to college for youth care.
We've all hit some properties here, talked about this, but I'm going to go ahead and close out on one. Now, like I said, I think this is a dice and a mechanic that is going to see a resurgence in popularity, especially mentioning this property, and that is Daggerheart. If y'all have not heard about Daggerheart, it is coming out from Critical Role. It is one of their systems that they're putting out. And the way it plays out, you have 2d12, one dice that is called Hope, one dice that is called Fear. And you roll them together, and the impact of your character based on that. And it's that duality of the forces of hope and fear playing out that affects the character. How popular this game is going to get, I think we're going to see a lot. I've seen tons of reviews out there. Seriously, on YouTube, I can't cover it as well as some people out there have. It's getting tons of press right now. So if you want to know more about that game, literally, go check it out. If that big a group is saying, hey, the D12 is something, I think y'all are kind of pioneering it.
We're the hipsters. We liked the D12 before it was popular.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that's right. Recognized.
Exactly.
With that, closing out the show for the evening, I do definitely want to thank all my guests. I would love to know if you've got anything else y'all want to mention, any place where people are going to be able to find you.
Well, I'm getting ready for Gen Con. I will be running games for Nerdburger Games there. So I'm going to be running a Capers game and some Stagged Heroism.
And I think this is the third time that Craig/Nerdburger has been mentioned on this show tonight. So Craig is now currently sitting up in bed going, someone's talking about my games. What's going on?
I know.
What's going on? And he's just scouring the internet at the moment.
How about some other friends here? What else we got going on coming down?
Yeah, I might be at Gen Con. If I do, it's just going to be personal. Like, I'm not setting up a booth or anything. I'm feeling really guilty because I got the Diana Jones Award last year, and I'm expected to return it at Gen Con. So I'm trying to find a way I can go and hand it off to the next person. Yeah, I don't know if I'll make it, though. And then I'm definitely going to be going to PAX Unplugged this year. I really love PAX Unplugged. I'm going to be bringing a lot of prototypes to PAX Unplugged and having a good time there. Those are my only con appearances this year.
All right. Well, PAX Unplugged is awesome. And Michael, you want to plug? I know you got a con coming up.
Yeah, well, I will be at Gen Con. I will be there mostly just as an attendee, but I am running one panel on how to start running games. So I do that basically every year. Other than that, I'm going to be playing a bunch of games. But I do run my own convention. So if you are in Dayton, Ohio in November, I'm sorry. But you can come hang out with us as we play games. It's like a 500 to 600 person, very small, very much focused on indie RPGs. We have D&D and Pathfinder, but most of our games are not D&D and Pathfinder. And like Action 12 Cinema got a lot of playtesting done there as well. And that is again in November in Dayton, Ohio. And I will just quickly plug, I do a ton of things. I have a podcast about the TV show Smallville. So if you like the show Smallville, I'm doing a rewatch of every single episode. We are in the middle of season 7, which is by far the worst season so far. But I absolutely have a ton of fun. And I have a rotating guest every episode. It's different people. So if you like Smallville and you're a podcaster, reach out. I'll probably have you on the show.
Oh, awesome.
Anthony or Todd, you got anything you want to toss out there?
Anthony, go right ahead.
I was about to say, do you want to go? All right. So I'll actually be vending at CharCon, which is a small gaming convention in Charleston, West Virginia. Heading out there in about 2 weeks for that. My next convention appearance after that, just currently the last of the year, I'm still waitlisted for a couple others. It is the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo in, they believe it's the first weekend of October. If everything goes as planned, because getting minions to help with the booth is always a challenge. But as every one of us can attest, but as long as everything goes well, I'm hoping to have some sessions of Wii Boomers as well as at least one of the 3 other games in the works. And I've actually been working with a cover artist recently to try to finalize the core system behind Gas Bashers, which is called The Rest is Play, abbreviated as TRIP. We're trying to get what I'm calling the Day Trip Edition, basically the very abbreviated, here's your 20-page book, no art, everything you need in order to run a game. And literally everything of Gas Bashers and then some that people were asking for in the Kickstarter I couldn't fit in my page count. So all of the other crazy stuff is going to be in there. I'm trying to get that finalized, get the cover out, and just do a print-on-demand release, hopefully this summer if all goes well.
Nice.
So definitely, you'll see me around, and others will sadly be seeing me around more often.
Over to you, Todd.
I'm not going to be going to any convention. I've actually got a vacation coming on next week, and with absolutely no plans whatsoever, I have suddenly found myself really exploring the idea of making new additions to things that I have worked on before.
Well, friends, plugging for the channel really quick. So, Tome Travelers, we do release the live video uncut to our main channel, and then we put out the edited podcast on Rook and Rasp Podcasts on YouTube. You can use the YouTube podcasting app in order to be able to listen to all of them. This includes a lot of our old material from some of our original shows, such as the Dice Voyeurs, Tome Travelers, the original Seriously Let's Play, and a few others you can find there from my old Southgate Media days. If you want to, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe on that channel. We're just kind of bringing it back. It was kind of more just a repository of everything we had done in the past. So now we're actually going to try and use it. I think the next thing we've got coming up is going to be, we have Star Trek returning. We have Smuggler's Blues. The Redemption podcast has come to us with a side quest story. Those will be coming up here pretty soon. And then cannot forget, after Gen Con, Seriously Let's Play Season 5 is coming out. We have a series of 8 actual plays that are going to be put out for various indie properties, including one from a member here. So Todd is going to have one coming out. Please be sure to check in with that. And then I don't know when, I don't know where, but I guarantee as part of our Seriously Let's Play, which we have done for the last 2 years, we will be doing our IGDN diversity sponsorship marathon that we do every year. Last year we raised over $1,000 for the diversity sponsorship. Let's do it again. Thank you so much for coming on, and guests and people out there in chat, thank you. We hope y'all all have a good evening. Night, everybody.
Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.